Okay, so I just finished this one. I talked about this one last time. And this one I'm working on at home.
These are not the kind of facts that we need.
Okay. All right.
What are you thinking about?
Okay, so feeling this is sort of like, I looked at the statue of the wrestlers in the main building on campus.
Is there a plaster cast of it?
It's a plaster cast, and I don't know, I just really liked it. So I kind of did that plan over there, and I was investigating sort of Islamic patterns, and then also a few Indian paintings, and then for the painting part of it, I'm looking at a Mongolian mandala.
What was it about these things that interested you, though?
I don't know. They just called out, and
when you're going to present your work in a crypt like this, you need to start to try to develop language for what it is that we're supposed to respond to. Not, you have to give us a moment here.
Okay.
Why do I, Joe, care about this? Now, you don't have to answer it right now, but next time.
I'm trying to sort of do the thing where it's like you sort of just flood the image with like patterns or figures or whatever to sort of intrigue.
To what?
To intrigue the.
To intrigue.
Yeah. And also, I'm sort of jettisoning perspective and trying to focus on, in this one, superimposition. And then it's just, thematically, it's about sort of, athleticism and also, struggle and, these two people, this might just be like unrelated or just an accident, but these are like the same person, so it's sort of like a about self-discipline, which is like a theme of both these paintings, and sort of the triangular composition is sort of like sort of about stability and sort of like overcoming challenges and stuff like that, and that's what this.
But I have one more question. Did you take the Greek wrestling pair and then dress them in those clothes?
I did. It's sort of a censorship thing, I
think. Okay, we'll come back to that. Go ahead.
And then, this one, it sort of deals with similar themes of self-discipline, and I was reading 3 books recently that really struck me. One was the Hikam by Ibn Ata'Allah Iskandari or something like that. And then also Kierkegaard's Sickness Unto Death, and the complete essays of Michel de Montaigne. It's sort of and I was also thinking about a question in my last critique that was like, why do I like muscles? Why do I like violence? I don't know. I thought, like, why does the world like muscles and violence? That was sort of my question. And sort of there's this sort of it's sort of like it's chaotic, and this figure's sort of like he's got this sort of bird and this bird sort of represents like wisdom, and
Where is the world that you're in there? What world is that? That world with those palaces.
This is sort of a fantasy world, and I was thinking a lot. I was really trying to think about atmospheric perspective, and this is sort of the Nuremberg Chronicle, if you've ever heard of it. So that's sort of the world. I just found it really interesting, and you know, there's sort of a fantasy sort of setting, which, you know, I mean, it's like sort of a loosely tied metaphorically, but I really have to think about that too. So.
The more specific you can be about those things, I mean, that's an interesting bunch of sources, Joe. You know, from Kierkegaard to the, what was the last one?
The Nuremberg Chronicle.
The Nuremberg Chronicle. And so, I mean, if the painting is in some sense a way of pulling your interest in those things together, you know, then try to find language for what that is for you. You know, what is the connection? Why are you into, you know, these things, and then into the synthesis of them?
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
I mean, you just gotta dig to find that language.
One thing that occurs to me, and this sort of is like pertains not just to Joe, is like there's this hard thing that you have to get used to, I think, in writing, where like when you edit a piece of writing, you'll notice that you'll say things like, perhaps, blah, 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 blah. I think, blah, 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 blah. Or these kinds of things. And when you edit your writing, you have to take all that out. And then so the sentence ends up being not, I like muscles and violence, but there is muscles and violence. It can't be a proposition. It has to just, there's this thing in writing where you have to write as if it's just true, right? Then when you write like that, then okay, of course somebody can come and say the world is not full of muscles and violence. But there's this thing where it's like it's not very, it's just somehow it doesn't work when you're always saying I think or I think or I like. It just doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't really add up.
It's not convincing.
Yeah, it's not convincing. It's also just not. It's not. It's dissembling in some way. It's disingenuous in some way.
Well, it's not taking responsibility for the thing.
It doesn't
you're
take
saying,
responsibility
you know?
for the thing you're saying.
Right.
Maybe that's the most important part.
Right.
And so it's not just. It's a question. It's not a question of whether you like this. It is a question of what to do about it. Because yeah, I agree with you. The world is filled with violence and depictions of muscular men and voluptuous women, and I'm not really that confused as to why. Actually, I don't find that to be a terribly confusing question. What I want is to have. I want you to do so much more than to just say, I wonder why the world is filled with violence. I mean, I don't believe you that like there's even in the tone of your voice, there's a kind of cuteness or something, a kind of like, oh, I don't know, you know. It's like, no way, I don't believe you. You read all these books, like you must take responsibility at some point for the things that you say and do, and you're not a child now. You're the painter. You're the adult. You're the one teaching us something.
And you're calling
it's not a question.
And you're calling our attention to this kind of Boschian, you know, dystopia or something. So, like, that matters, right? I mean, all those things matter. You spent a lot of time working on this, so you wouldn't do it if it didn't matter to you.
And I concur, especially the part about taking responsibility for this thing, because not only are you doing a kind of Boschian thing, you're also doing a kind of syncretic thing.
Yeah.
And you're mixing several different cultures. And I can see I can see those cultures here. I mean, there's definitely Hindu going on, and there's definitely Greek antiquity. There's also like shout outs to people like Rousseau, and there seems like Albert Dürer as well. Fine, but construct a rhetorical argument. No, there's a better word. Rationale for why you are doing this. Because at some point, someone is going to corner you, whether it's a gallerist or a curator or whatever, and they're going to say, and it is going to be a moment when you go out on the spot. They're going to say, okay, so what's this work about? What are you doing? And if you do that cutesy thing where you go, oh, shucks, I don't know. Like, that's the part of which I walk away. And I'm like, this person doesn't even know how to talk about their work. You gotta know how to talk about your work.
Good.
Yeah, I was also thinking about like how that really can end up in like this territory of like appropriation. But I think that what your advantages in these paintings is that they are so playful, and it actually takes up this language of like video games where that is actually like way more accepted to have like all these multiple cultural
Sources, right.
sources and references, like the Great Wall of China mixed with these Greek wrestler mixed with this queen of whatever land. Like, there, I feel like you have you've opened up the space with like your painting style. I don't know if that's the term used to be able to talk about it in the work, but I think you do have to like have accountability of like why you're doing it or like your reason for doing it. But I don't know. I think it's also just the work itself is just really hilarious. So.
But it over time, Joe. I mean, it's not something you're going to work out overnight. But whether the work is some kind of post video game dystopia, or it's more playful, or it's it's about like what Jeff was calling syncretic, like where cultural references from all over the place are just thrown together. All of those things, there's a lot going on that isn't fully thought through. And when I mean thought through, I don't just mean in the head, I mean in the paintings themselves, And so it's like you develop this vision to such a point of richness that now, ironically, you kind of have to go back to the basics. What's that Yeats poem, The Circus Animal's Desertion? It's a great late Yeats poem in which he talks about all these beautiful poems he wrote when he was young that had this fabulous mythic fairies flying around and beautiful Irish landscapes, and it was all very, flowery and wonderful. And at the end he says, the metaphor is like that he's walked up a ladder into the clouds, He said, I must lie down where all the ladders start. At the foul rag and bone shop of the heart. So, you've got this wonderfully flowery world here. But now, I mean, it's not just, this is like an artistic thing, an artistic process that many people go through all the time, where you walk it back to the beginning and see what does this actually mean? Where did it come from, So, yeah.
I also started thinking about like Shepard Fairey, who's like an artist that is thinking a lot more like in design terms, but also like graffiti terms, and then like how he then like reconstructed that to have like to move it into more like a political like art making form. I don't know if that makes sense, but like it went from like being this like this street art idea to then becoming like the Barack Obama Hope poster. So I don't know. This work makes me think about something like that.
I really like the brightness. Oh, sorry.
What's that? Oh, sorry. What's the poem again?
The Circus Animal's Desertion by Yeats, Y-E-A-T-S.
I really like the brightness of the figures. Like they're so standing out, and like other animals still have the similar brightness that blends in with the nature, but humans, like they stand out so so privilegedly, like how the after mother society changed to father society, the
How the
human,
what?
like the humans look so, the humans in their suit look so privileged, and it is how like humans try to separate themselves from other animals in nature after the mother lady society changed to father lady society.
I mean, I think it goes back again to just ideas, which I also like. I pretty much like the way you're painting. Like, I feel like I like looking at these paintings, maybe I'm actually not as interested in the flatness of this one, but I don't think it's done, so, but it's also, those drawings are very, very beautiful to me, and I love seeing the more landscapey thing. Like, I feel like you're already kind of doing a lot, like in terms of the two different layers. I think that's really interesting, and how the bushes are like patterned like gates. I think you're doing something really interesting with space. It's just a matter of coming up with some ideas for the paintings that are not dumb, that are not just like, I don't know, or, like they almost feel willfully dumb, or like, what I think to have some kind of stakes in terms of the ideas, like to have some skin in the game of like what makes a good story, what makes because these kinds of paintings that you're referencing are basically paintings that were done in books or had to do with religious narratives, and at least those narratives are, well, you feel them when they're felt, and when a painter paints them, they're grappling with the story, with the idea embedded in that story.
Fox, I have a question. Does the idea have to come from the artist? Could it be from outside?
It definitely, I think most ideas are not invented, actually. A lot of ideas just already exist.
Yeah, but I feel like what you guys are pushing Joe to the direction that he needs to figure out why he is doing this. It is about intention and his values. But what if he look at his painting in a more distant way, and instead of thinking why am I doing this, think about what it is doing?
Well,
Could this be an idea?
I think that's a perfectly fair question. I mean, that's a. But both those questions are fair questions that sort of like look at the same phenomenon from different angles. I mean, my reason that I would ask him the first question right now, I mean, Fox can speak about this for herself, but is because I find it confusing what his motivation is here. I don't get it. I mean, I see that he wants to make a painting and he enjoys doing it. And part of the pleasure is just putting all this stuff together. Beyond that, I'm not so sure. I mean, I think the middle one, the simplification of the middle one, Joe, is an attempt to do something like what Fox was talking about, like cut out some of the sheer volume of incident so that you can see what is all this leading to. I mean, in the one on the left, for me, what happens is there's just so much going on that I don't know. I mean, I think, okay, whatever. And in this one, I don't want to spend a lot of time saying why, but somewhat more focused than that one. Maybe it has to do with what Dee was talking about with the way the figures stand out from the landscape and the formal structure of the landscape in the foreground in relation to the background. But if you can make, when you have the image in the middle, I still don't know why you've got those figures there and what exactly they're supposed to do. But now I feel like at least the question is being restricted for the moment to a set of possibilities that seems coherent. Whereas before it's just like a lot of talk. It's like, what's the word prolix? When someone the person just keeps talking in the painting, and this is when you stuff the painting with subject matter. Then I ask, well, what does all this add up to? And to ask back in the face of that, to ask your question, well, what is the painting doing? The reason I'm asking the other form is because I can't tell what the painting is doing.
So the painting is not explaining itself enough, so that the idea is not that clear.
That's how it feels to me.
So we are kind of expecting to get the idea from Joe as an artist, like outside of the
Well, I'll also say that we are speaking in such a way that we are also revealing our own values. Like, I'm not sitting here thinking that I am 100% right. I understand myself to be an individual, but I understand that I have to risk being an I. I must make statements which you can either agree or disagree with.
Right.
That is up to you. It is not my responsibility to always be right. It's my responsibility to, again, in some sense, every statement I make is some kind of risk, right? So it's up to you to decide. You're welcome to disagree. But I want to also, I would say that where my values do lie is not so much in, I think that, and just from knowing Joe's history, I think that we are asking you to face a very different audience. That there's an audience that you were engaged with in Albuquerque, and now I'm comparing these paintings literally to Rembrandt. How does Rembrandt deal with narrative? So the stakes are suddenly much, much higher for you. Or maybe not even higher, but quite different. I think that, going to the Frick right now and seeing the Barclay Hendricks, you can also see I don't think I know a painter who sort of deals better with a kind of like, just an incredible way of moving. Rembrandt's paintings are always just incredibly moving, depending on how the light and the emphasis in the painting works.
But one last thing about your question. Like I said, I don't know what I'm saying. It's not like my opinion about this is the definitive one somehow. But for what it's worth, yes, I think the idea in what I think of as a effective painting should come through from the painting itself. Luca was talking this morning about types of art that need the backstory provided elsewhere. Fine, and there are also paintings that function that way. But that's not what we're looking at now. And so, in terms of this kind of painting and this kind of painterly ambition, I think the painting needs to make clear what its reason for being is. Even if you can't put that into words, it doesn't have to be a verbal concept or a soundbite of some kind. But you have to have the feeling, or a sort of consensus of people has that feeling. Yes, this is where this painting takes me. Why it's there. I can't yet tell from this painting what that is. That's not a fatal problem. It's just like a moment in the history of his painting.
Would you say that there is like no hierarchy for there's no direction for the viewer to go to? Not that there has to be an end result, but there's just everything is everywhere, so there's no hierarchy or anything pointing to a thing, whatever the thing may be. Everything is kind of just there.
Right, and then I ask myself, is that the point? Is that what he's trying to do? And somehow, if I go there, I still don't quite feel satisfied. It's not clear to me that that's so. They're not quite crazy enough for that to be the ultimate, thing that I'm taking away from them. They're quite very orderly, actually, in their way.
I really recommend T.J. Clark's book, The Site of Death.
Oh yeah.
I think that will really. It's called ekphrasis. Is that what it's called? You're describing
ekphrasis.
Yeah. He's describing a Poussin painting. He goes again and again and looks at this painting.
Wait just a second.
That's all I had to say.
I want to just to hold that thought. That essay about the Poussin landscapes, that is a really great suggestion, because Poussin does this thing where he takes you through, you wander through the landscape in the same, not in the same way, but, in an analogous way of what you're doing here. And there's some sort of often, there's a narrative, but the narrative isn't necessarily always clear what it is. But the thing the paintings are trying to do is very clear in the paintings themselves. You'll see it when you see the painting. I think I showed you one of these ones. Okay. Judgment, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like he does have things that are working in his painting for him. I think what discredited what you're doing was how you were explaining your work. I feel like it took away from the time, like we can see the amount of time and effort you put into this. And like it feels playful, they look like action figures, and your use of color with like the pastel deer or like the blue dogs. I feel like there's several elements to, or like the atmospheric perspective. I feel like you have things in your work that if I saw your work, I'd be like, okay, this is Joe's work. Like you have things that are working for you, from my perspective. It's just like the stake that Fox was talking about, like what's the risk? Like I feel like you're not committed to an idea with what you're creating, but I see like reoccurring themes in your work that is working for you, or your overall color palettes. So yeah.
I really think that what you're doing over here with exploration, for the first time we see that you're moving away from the perspective, like the deep perspective that goes into your planes. Like you have such prowess with that. You're so good at that, but then you've done that too much. And it's like, for me, when I look at this and the surface, like the background is flat, I feel the freshness in that. But then, like I feel like the background in this artwork is Islamic enough. I feel like you don't need to make the figures Islamic too. Because I get your idea of like trying to mix these cultures and like trying to make like a new space in the timeline where maybe these two different cultures could have been together. I really like the idea I really like ideas which have a lot of amalgamation in them, but I feel like if you left the figures the way they are in that painting, it would probably, like, I would feel like more attracted to look at them. I feel like if you painted them as muscular as you painted them over here, but then they sort of like, what's happening for me in that painting is that it's becoming too flat. Over here there's too much perspective, and over there like the flatness is almost working so well, but then the figures are becoming too flat, and I feel like you need to bring them out. Like I feel like, I mean I understand like the Islamic paintings are like flat, and I see the Rajasthani paintings, the aerial view perspective, the lack of perspective, but since we're talking about two different cultures and we're talking about these cultures which have so much of volume, maybe employing that into this would, preserve its freshness, which is working over here.
Gosh, you guys, this is getting into the realm of what we call prescriptive criticism, where you try to paint the other person's painting for them. I think you have to kind of.
I don't agree.
Well, we can disagree.
Yeah, but it's not. Let's just let the comment stand.
I
think it's a really important thing she just said.
Well, let's finish it then, but and then we'll disagree about it. Go ahead. Gotcha.
Oh, I'm done.
Can I say
Well, let's remember. So, what did you think was valuable about it?
I mean, I disagree with what she said. Like, I don't think that the figures need to be painted in that way. I think it's enough that the style is being used, but it just, yeah. I thought Vyashka said it more eloquently.
Well, the reason that I don't think that's useful is because, according to what standard, what is the principle of judgment
Like I see what he's trying to do, bringing two cultures, bringing a lot of different cultures together, but then that painting in the end feels like it's one, like it's just that culture. It doesn't feel like the amalgamation. It doesn't feel like, I don't see, because the way faces are painted, because the clothes that he imagined and put them, like drape those cultures into, they become Islamic now. I do not know, like I cannot tell that this is referencing this culture. If I didn't know this work of art, I wouldn't know that. Like I would never guess that it is referencing this. And I feel
what makes you think? Are you talking about this painting or the middle?
Yeah, the one in the
The middle one.
I'm talking about the exploration that he did. it works better as a work of art for me than it does over here when it's finished. And it's like I said, the background is Islamic enough.
I
Figures
don't
don't
know
need
what
to be.
Islamic enough means.
The flatness
As
of
in,
the
like,
forms.
It has enough referencing to the Islamic culture.
Enough,
to the,
enough in relation to what?
History of
the history of, yeah.
Iconography.
iconography and the
Like-
history of
But I said that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you're establishing a
It's-
sort
it's
of,
like
wait,
this
wait,
one.
let me finish. You're establishing a sort of place of, you know, enough, too much, too little. On a basis, I just don't understand that, what the principle is there.
I mean that when I look at the background, it clicks to me that he is referencing Islamic paintings.
Okay,
That's what I mean.
okay. And then but then extrapolating from that, there was your second one. That's what I guess I'm rather lost.
Yeah, I mean, like, the figures, like, the reference to this sculpture is lost because of the way he's painted the figures. He's also turned them into Islamic painting figures,
Right,
Pakistani figures.
I think that's a perfectly legitimate point too, although I don't see, again, I mean, what he's doing here is inherently heterogeneous. So the fact that those figures dilute the Islamicness of the patterns seems to be very much in tune with what he does in general.
I kind of understand what Yashi is saying because, like, you don't, like, if this is the structure, the basis of the idea that there's two Greek figures in front of the Islamic wall, and then you have a painting like this where it's like putting all of these cultural references together. In that middle painting, in the through line that all these paintings are doing the same thing, that one is not.
I see.
Because it does not have the variance of cultures. It flattens that idea out completely because it contradicts everything else where it's like trying to bring in all of these associations to different cultures by making the Asiatic Islamic character on top of the Islamic wall. Like that's completely different from everything else. Well, not everything else. The monster thing is its own thing, but it's different from this painting and this drawing.
Okay, I think that's it, right?
I just think it's interesting that nobody mentioned the landscape.
Fox did.
Oh, really? I didn't.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful drawing too, Joe, by the way.
Thank you.
All right, that's it.